The van option is quite popular. It's something that a lot of people engage in, the van life. A lot of people experience it and enjoy it. They get to travel wherever they could afford. Of course, you have to consider the cost of traveling around. There will be a considerable cost in gas. Most vans are fueled by gasoline, some by petrol or diesel, which is even more expensive than gasoline, so you have to take that in consideration. It could be quite a expense, especially if you consider a whole year, 2 years worth of doing that, and how far and wide you travel. If you go cross country, you're looking to spend lots of money. Depending on how efficient your van is, the more efficient your van is, most likely it is more expensive, newer type of van or technology or engine. So you will have perhaps a bill or car payment, car note as they call it. And you have to also consider that having a car note and an expensive gas bill every month could put you right about what you would pay for a mortgage. So you have to consider that very well, very much, very carefully, and expect to dish out a good amount of money. Hopefully you have enough savings, because time spent traveling is time spent away from work. Most likely you will not be able to work. Some of you may be able to comfortably afford that and be fine with that. Many of us may not. Cost of living is quite high in many areas of the country. Also, you have to consider paying for food, paying for, yes, sometimes you may have to stay in a hotel for not so much comfort, although that's a big part of that, but also for necessary things, such as showering, just laying down safely in a bed, in a room that's relatively safe, as in contrast from sleeping in a van. I have done that myself, and trust me, it may be a jarring and unnerving experience, depending on what area of the country you are at the time. If you're within a city, it could be quite loud, it could be quite disturbing when it comes to traffic, sirens blaring all over the place in many areas of the country, especially big cities, larger cities, medium-sized cities. And also there is a considerable danger, considerable risk in living the van life. There's always that risk, even in the country, even in the wild, of other people detecting your location, detecting your presence there, and perhaps not having your best interest in mind and attempting to do some harm. They may attempt to do some harm, whether it's one person or more. They may attempt to break in, vandalize your property or vehicle, vandalize you. They may attempt to rob you, or worse, they may attempt to somehow hurt you or take you for ransom. You have to consider all these possibilities. They may attack you violently. They may threaten you. They may even kill you. It has happened. I suspect it will continue happening, although not so often, hopefully. And although the risk is relatively small, depending on the area again, it is, however, a very real risk and a reality to consider when going on the road like that. I would guess that people of poor health, poor facilities as far as financial savings, financial prowess, financial assets, having pretty much that facility of having items and assets so you can use to go on the road. If you don't have those, then that may not be an option for you. That may not be a recommended option anyway for you to go out on the road. You have to be pretty much in very good health, or at least decent health, to be able to not only do a lot of things on your own as far as fixing breakages, fixing things that may go bad or may fall into disrepair, but also just living quite uncomfortably many times and sleeping out on the road, coping with the stresses out there, and perhaps fend off attacks, threats. You may have to be ready for that. I don't recommend being armed, lethally armed. That is just not something I believe in. However, that has to be offset very carefully and absolutely offset through planning, a lot of pre-planning, a lot of thinking, and taking the best decisions, making good decisions as to where you go, what time, how you go about going, and the type of living arrangements you have. Of course, if you live in a large motorhome, you will be relatively more safe than if you live in a minivan. Of course, there's a big difference. However, there may be a larger risk of being targeted because the larger volume, the larger vehicle, and the more fancy that vehicle is, that will attract the higher level criminals or criminal to-bes, and they may think or they may find out that you have some financial backing and try to either force you to give them money, give up or withdraw money from an ATM machine, for example, or they may force you to give up some cash if you have any, some assets, some goods, valuables that you may have around. So you may have to be very careful where you go, how, when, all of that, whether it's dark, whether it's going to be nighttime by the time you get to a certain spot. You have to, again, be very mindful, very wary of your surroundings. And again, that could cause a lot of stress, that could cause a lot of unease, and you have to very much plan your movements. Some of you may decide to arm yourselves. Some of you may decide to have some sort of security system installed. It is up to you and your capabilities, your state of mind, of course, your health, psychological health especially, but also your physical health. You have to be able to handle any kind of weapon that you may have. And keep in mind that weapons may be no good when you're asleep. Weapons may be no good when you're unaware of danger, or if caught red-handed, as they say, or unprepared. If you're on your own, even if you're with someone else, or some other people, you may not see danger coming. Attacks may be sudden, and you may not be able to grab any weapon. Your weapon may also be a danger to yourself, not only because they provide the opportunity, potential of someone grabbing it, stealing it, taking hold of it, taking possession of it, and using it against you, perhaps, or just taking off with it, and then you're out of a expensive piece of asset. Very hard to locate and retrieve any kind of stolen weapon. I've seen it, I've heard of it, and very, very difficult to get hold of that. And of course, there remains the danger of that weapon being used for crimes, not only against you, but also against others. And then, since that weapon is most likely registered to your name, to your person, then that could bring trouble coming your way. So it is risky, it is a huge liability and responsibility to have weapons. So I really personally don't recommend it. But again, if you wish to pursue that route, you may wish you the best of luck. Brain power, I believe, is more potent, more powerful, more far-reaching, and perhaps could keep you safe and alive and healthy a lot more than a meager and dangerous weapon, keeping it around. Weapons could also be harmful to people that are in very much stressful situations. You could be under severe lack of sleep conditions. You could be experiencing insomnia. You could be experiencing all kinds of stress, and that could deem you a very vulnerable person as far as health goes and otherwise. And you can potentially hurt yourself or others with those weapons that you were keeping around. That's why it is a huge liability and risk and responsibility for not only you, but those around you. So again, that's why I don't really recommend going that route. The van life is quite risky, especially in big cities. Big cities bring all kinds of challenges. As to living in a van or any other vehicle, as I mentioned, first you have to find a safe parking space, parking area for you to spend a night, spend an evening, spend longer amounts of time, more than a few hours, perhaps a day, 2 days, even a week. In some instances, you have to find not only a public area, but an area that they allow you to inhabit for longer than a few hours. Walmart and other big store parking lots are popular destinations for RV goers, van life people, transients, people that live in vehicles. However, these places are littered with a menagerie of video cameras, CCTV, closed circuit television cameras, security, 24-hour in some cases, security vehicles, security personnel, cops, police, officers may be patrolling the area. They may be knocking on your window. Remember, a lot of these places are private. Most big store parking lots are private areas, private property, private parking lot, not only for the big store around, like a Walmart or Kmart in some cases, or whatever, a mall area, but they also may be patrolled and taken care for by the city, by the town, where that business happens to be located. Each city usually has very close relationships with their police departments where they protect businesses, business property. You may be deemed, looked at as some sort of invader, some sort of weirdo living out of your van or vehicle. So you may want to consider this. Again, they may knock on your window and ask you to leave, or they may outright call a tow truck on you and attempt to tow you out. They may call the authorities, including security personnel and police, on you. Whether it's warranted or not, whether it's with any notice or not, they may surprise you, and you may be in a situation where a police officer is called to the scene, and you may be asleep. Very bad situations have come from such a predicament, especially dealing with minority groups. As good as police may be in some instances, they have proven to be fatal and harmful, at the very least, in many other instances, dealing with especially minority groups. This is something that is being widely reported. If you have not found out, it's because you are even living in some sort of denial of the situation, or you have been living under a rock somewhere and care not to pay attention to any kind of news or publication on the matter. Van living, again, is dangerous even in the country. In the countryside, open area, open country, or forests, you can be readily attacked by wildlife, whether it be crawlers, such as spiders, brown recluses, black widows, and the such, snakes, armadillos, raccoons, you name it. There's a repertoire of animals that could, in theory, be attracted to you and your area, because maybe you left food unattended or open, or you are just encroaching in their environment and land area, and they're paying you a visit and investigating to see what in the hell you happen to be doing there. You know, you have to be ready for this. You have to have some sort of first aid kit and a plan, most importantly, to either call for help, drive yourself to help, or have someone that may be with you drive you to the nearest hospital. You may need to know, I actually recommend this, know your surroundings as far as what hospitals are around, what are their hours, whether they have emergency services or not. If it's a hospital, they most likely do. There may be no hospitals anywhere near. There may be just small clinics around, so you may want to find out, especially if you're going to be spending the night, overnight, in a very unfamiliar area. It's quite difficult sometimes to become familiar with the area that you're inhabiting, especially if you're, as I mentioned, out in the country, out in the open areas. There are less cell phone towers if you happen to have a cell phone, as I believe most adults do now. And, you know, you may have no connection, you may have no internet access. You may think that you may have unlimited internet, but that unlimitedness is only dependent on whether you have a cell phone signal or not. Cell phone signal accessibility is not unlimited. Going by experience, every time I drive out of any town or city center more than 40 miles, my cell phone signal becomes sketchy and weak. In many instances, non-existent, and it dies out altogether. So that is something you have to consider and be ready. You may choose to have radio, whether it's two-way, walkie-talkie, CB, or even go as far as getting into ham, which is usually your FM transceiver, transmitter, receiver. You may want to acquire one of these CB or ham radios. They're not that much, especially the handheld type. You can find those affordable types for under $40 in many cases on eBay, Amazon, Walmart.com, perhaps. So you may be able to call, as hard and unlikely it may be to get a hold of someone through those mediums. However, it is a possibility that you may, especially if you tune in to the established emergency frequencies. This series will be continued on the next program. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please look for the next episode soon.